Wait, have you started the YouTube live? I will just let
I
you know.
am just starting it, and yes. All right. Let's get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on this lovely Saturday morning. Uh, Before I get to Hari's introduction and his talk, and we start with his talk, I would just like to give you a quick couple of guidelines that could help us drive this session more effectively. Please use the chat section for all your reactions and intercommunication that you would want to have. Any questions that you might have for Hari, please use the Q&A section there, and just so that we don't get lost in the questions don't get lost in the chat. All right, I'll quickly get to Hari's introduction. So Hari is a seasoned professional with more than 15 years of experience as a product manager for customer experience solutions. He has designed customer experience solutions tailored to both enterprise needs and their brand promise. Hari's work has taken him through the Middle East and Asian markets, where he has designed customer experience solutions for the banking, telecom, and insurance sectors. At ThoughtWorks, Hari works with the client leadership teams to design and deliver clients' extended reality strategies. Thank you so much, Hari, for joining us and giving us this talk, and over to you for the session.
Thank you, Ved. Thank you so much for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Converge. Thank you for joining this talk on the role of a business analyst in XR world. So as Ved mentioned, last 15 years of experience was predominantly on customer experience, customer interaction solutions. But the last 1 year is kind of a fascinating journey for me because it just turned tables for me to get into the world of extended reality. So this talk is predominantly on how extended reality is kind of changing lives, how it is disrupting the market, and as business analysts, what is the kind of role that we kind of play for this particular technology. So my agenda is pretty simple. I'm going to quickly talk about what is extended reality, just to make sure that we are all on the same baseline. And then we're going to talk about what is the impact of COVID-19 on extended reality. And then we're going to talk about the changing priorities and what is the world of BA in the extended reality space. So quickly on what is extended reality. I often see that people kind of interchangeably use the immersive technologies. The word extended reality typically means it's an umbrella term for augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality, all three different immersive technologies, right? But often people kind of interchangeably use the terminology in different ways. So I wanted to kind of have a quick puzzle. So as Ved mentioned, it's time to open up your chat windows and probably try to answer. I'm going to look into the chat as well. Probably you can actually use the chat windows and kind of give your thoughts on what this technology is. Like looking at the picture here, does anybody want to go guess? I can also give you a hint on this. It's kind of an overlay that exists on top of it. So this is nothing but an augmented reality. So what it means is that you have a real world, and on top of your real world, there is an overlay or there is some kind of information that is being presented to augment your information. So that's called as an augmented reality. So this information is kind of anchored in your virtual space. It is lying there. It is like sitting there so that you can kind of, the information is kind of augmenting your real world image with some additional data that you can use it. So if you want to move on, how about this one? Any guesses? Great, fantastic. Thank you, Ritu. Ritu Parna. Yes, that's what is virtual reality. So in this case, what is really happening is that the user is completely cut off from the real world. If you see those, the head-mounted devices itself, if you see that the user cannot see what is happening here. So he's kind of immersed into his own artificial created graphical world. And especially with the sounds and haptics and everything coming to the world, the user can be transformed into a completely different universe. The user can actually stay in a different universe, talk to it, and then take it forward. So that's the kind of thing that can bring in from a virtual reality experience. How about this one, the next one? I can give you a hint. So here it is kind of, the information is kind of overlaid and kind of anchored to the real world. So what is happening here is that the user, if you look at it, he's actually seeing his real world objects as well. And he's also able to see the virtual objects kind of flying around. And these virtual objects is kind of anchored to the real world as well. So which means the user, the virtual objects can actually find out what is really happening at this place. And it can actually do SLAM access, which is like simultaneous location and mapping, and know that if there is object, it can kind of know, understand based on the object, it can actually take proper directions, or it can start interacting with the users as well. So that's the mixed reality space, wherein the user get to know the virtual objects that is existing there. It kind of augments their presence over there, and at the same time there is virtual, and at the same time there is a real world that is happening up for the user. Right? How about this one? I promise this is the last one that you get to see. Any go? Sorry, Rituparna, this is not augmented. So this is again, you see a virtual, you see a real world object, which is a jet engine that is lying there. This is one of a classical use case that I've seen. This came in 2016 cycle, wherein for training simulators, it was predominantly used. But the users here, if you look at it, it's kind of, there is a real world object and there is a virtual object that's kind of overlaid on top of it, where the users can actually start interacting with that. So that's the kind of information, that's the kind of technology that can bring in here, because now you're actually bringing in a huge jet propulsion engine into your living room. A lot of other VR use cases, the MR use cases have already come into the picture, wherein the simulators can be brought into a real world environment, right into your living room. In healthcare industries where surgeries can be performed, in defense, and even in psychology of like interviewing candidates, everything, where the users can actually be simulated to an environment wherein they can actually perform certain things. So that's the kind of use cases that is being brought in here. So this is the last one. Sorry, I went in too fast. There's a no-brainer question. It's about the virtual reality. So just to conclude, I think you had a fair experience of what we are talking here. You have, if you put it in a straight line, you have your real world environment, and then you have your augmented reality, which is information or data that is kind of superimposed on top of your real world data. And then you have your mixed reality, which kind of mixes both your augmented reality as well as your virtual reality. And then you have your virtual reality, which is completely kind of shutting you down away from your the real world, right? And if you look at it, the kind of devices that is being used for each of these technologies is also quite different. So for augmented reality, even your new age phones or tablets that is there in the market is kind of adopting to augmented reality. If you look at it, Apple is already coming with LiDAR sensors, so it is kind of even going beyond augmented reality. And then you have for mixed reality, is mostly enterprise kind of devices that is there, like HoloLens and Lenovo Sky Blue devices that is there, and then Magic Leap that is there in the market. And for virtual reality, this like kinds of shuts you down from your real world environment. So devices like Oculus Quest and all those things plays a large role on that. Trust me, this is the last one that I have. Any guesses? So this is actually a real world image. There is actually a small photograph that you get to see. But we kind of augmenting, the reason that I brought this photograph is that this is how an augmented reality can actually play a lot of use cases there. So if you look at it, the user actually kind of superimposes that information with a tablet, and then you get to see a lot of information about the species coming in there. So what is happening here is that the data is being captured. So there's an image recognition that happens. And there is, this data has been sent to some processing power where using ML algorithms recognizes what this image that is being captured are, and then it augments with additional data on top of it. So these are some of the use cases that we can talk about. So with that said, let's move on to the impact of COVID-19 and extended reality. What it actually has happened, what has changed the tables for us, what did it work, is there a set of challenges and opportunities? So the impact of global economy on COVID. So typically, I do not want it to dwell into what is the impact on the overall economy, but I wanted to kind of bring in two important things here. Point number one is the profitability impact and the short-term liquidity impact. And if you look at it, most of the industries, and predominantly if you see the right top quadrant, the travel, tourism, airlines, and every single industry like retail, is kind of taken a huge impact on both profitability and liquidity impact, because absolutely there is no travel that is happening. Airlines are not moving in. There's only few flights that is being there. People are not stepping out. It's predominantly online shopping that is happening, and then we're shopping only for the basics. We're not doing any kind of luxury shopping. So there is a kind of a ripple effect because of that. The financial services has taken an impact, and since nothing is moving, the logistics, automotive, and oil and gas, and so there is kind of a complete slowdown that is happening there. So the growth is already, a lot of other companies, economies are already projecting a negative growth, and for the year 2020, the projected as per IMF is about -6% growth, right? So now going back here, now let's see, on the other hand, when the economies are slowing down, when the industries are coming down, what is really happening from an AR/VR perspective? From AR/VR perspective, we see completely inverse of what has happened here. We see about a 35% increase in the CAGR growth. We see about close to 125 billion increase in the overall revenue. We are seeing about 26.35% increase just for the year. So the market is turning, like everybody is like looking at some kind of a savior, some kind of a technology that can actually, everybody can bounce on it and then to recover from their past. So what is really happening here is something that the technology looks like is trying to address all the problems that is there. So in a product companies, typically in startups that you could see is that we typically do something known as a market product fit. Just identifying if the product actually meets the market demands. So I try to do a similar kind of an exercise to find out the problem solution fit. Just to understand if there is an actual problem exists, because the problems or challenges determined by COVID, is it something is kind of intermediate, or is it kind of short forecasted, or is it like it's going to exist for a longer time? And how is the solution perceived in the eyes of the customer? And would the customer, the future customer, prefer the solution? Which means that will they actually carry forward, take this forward into the solution? So that's exactly what I wanted. So there's action. Is there a problem that exists? Is there a solution that we can find? And how does the solution can apply to the futuristic customers' benefit? So what are the problems that COVID is kind of imposed on? Predominantly, I kind of put it into 6 layers. One, obviously social distancing. Everybody, like I was just talking to some of the colleagues before you guys joined, everybody talked about the social factor. Because suddenly human being a social animal, we are kind of now intercepted saying that traditional face-to-face interactions cannot happen. You cannot walk into a place, you cannot do a mall, you can walk into the mall, you cannot get into a theaters. Again, travel has been cut down to a larger extent. There is restricted operations in everything. Like for example, the government itself has put on a lot of lockdown restrictions, which has kind of affected our disrupted supply chains, which has reduced the sales, and everything is now going touchless, contactless, and the customer behavior is same. I wanted to quickly talk about the last 2 things alone in more in detail. But the rest, everything is about kind of known, everybody kind of undergoing that. But this is something, the mental illness that is being caused is something is pretty much internal, that kind of varies between people to people. So everywhere, if you look at it, like there's some kind of fear that is already coming into us. Everywhere we are talking about being contactless. Should I touch this or not touch this? Should I keep it away from here? Like for example, even ATM, people are thinking about innovative technologies. How do I key in the number without touching an ATM? How do we withdraw the money? How do I kind of shop without touching anything? So there is something, an inbuilt fear that is being getting into the system. The fear of germs, the fear of touching people, the fear of what you call agoraphobia, like wherein fear of getting into some kind of contamination or anything. So hygiene becomes even more important, and people are getting into some kind of anxiety and depression. So with that, contactless is becoming a kind of a new reality in space. So when contactless is kind of becoming a new reality, one of the technologies that can actually kind of hook up on it or take that ladder and then move forward on that looks like is promising is XR. Again, I'm not saying that XR is a kind of a magic wand, or is XR is a technology that is going to wade away all your challenges that is there in COVID. But what we are seeing here is that XR is something that can be used to a larger extent to some of the problems that we see in COVID can be right about with that. So what are the solutions that exist? So I kind of touched upon some of the key industries here. If you look at it, I kind of touched upon some of the key industries that was there in the right top quadrant of the liquidity and profitability impact. The first one being the retail that I want to talk about. Already the retail have seen a transformation that is beyond what we expected. Like, for example, we kind of moved from a traditional shopping experience to online shopping experience. And very sooner, we are already getting into a completely VR shopping experience. There are VR portals that is coming in there. There are portals that is designed for individual needs. So, for example, today I cannot have a shopping experience like when I walk into the mall designed to my own need. A shopping layout cannot be changed. But in a VR environment, the behavior of the user's persona is already been identified. I can actually create experience what is more applicable for that particular user, right? I can also bring in virtual shopping environment with communal shopping in place. So I can actually shop along with my friends. I can get reviews from my friends to see if the product fits to me or is it like it's kind of appealing to me. I can get in there. So there's some kind of shift that's happening on VR from a retail shopping industries. Again, from a travel perspective, it is not aiding the travel mode, but what it does is that it kinds of avoids the impertinent travels that come into the picture. What I meant is that today, if I cannot travel, but if I wanted to give the same experience to the user, a prospective buyer who wants to see my product, I can actually ship him a headset, and then he can actually wear the headset and then completely kind of get into the immersive technology feeling of visualizing that particular product. Okay, now what I can do is that I can even go one level extra. I can actually do a teleporting app as well, wherein I can actually ship in there, teleport there, and then start interacting with the user, collaborate with him to understand, explain the features, and then make a possible sale at this point of time, right? So that's the kind of technology that is also evolving. The last 2 months, like the VR simulators is something that's hugely finding marketplace in a lot of industries, especially in defense, healthcare, classroom trainings, online trainings. To quote you some of the examples, one of the wind energy mill had a huge problem of saying that training those individuals because they have to climb through the top for their support personnel to actually get trained to service any of these industries. But we are coming into the picture. They can actually simulate that same environment right into their office space. Nobody needs to travel outside. The field engineers get trained there. They get the support that they wanted to do it. And a lot of times the fear of height and everything can also be kind of simulated right here. So we will get to know exactly the people when they have the fear of height, you can actually kind of coach them, train them to make them better performance. Similarly, surgeons, to kind of do any of the surgeries that they wanted to do it, you can actually simulate those environments. Similarly for pilots, similarly for defense, any of the simulations that you really wanted, those can be done using the VR simulators. Again, in the real estate space, you can actually 3D model your complete house or environment. So sales can be made much more easier. You don't need to travel to that particular place to actually make a sale that is happening. And for manufacturing and automotive sales, there's plethora of use cases. Some strong use case that I'm actually seeing it already being applied by top-notch automobile companies is that a VR sale that can happen. So they can build a complete VR environment of the car or the vehicle that they want to build in, and they can transport it to you, so that the sales engineer does not need to bring in the car. He just brings the device to you, and then you can wear the device and you can 3D model it the way that you wanted to do it. You can apply the colors that you wanted to do it, or you can make the configuration that you wanted to do it, so that the sales become even more immersive, more engaging, and more importantly, it is completely contactless, touchless, and you make it happen right into your living room. So this possible solutions, again, I'm not saying that these are the solutions that is already in place and this thing. These are some of the solutions that is already kind of experimented. We have seen a lot of applications of it for the challenges that we have seen. So we talked about challenges, we talked about the solutions. One other thing that also always comes into mind is that, hey, we have great solutions, we have the challenges that is there, but do we have enough number of devices that is there within the system? Unknowingly, a lot of mobile solutions today, as I talked, like Android, if you have an AR core, and for Apple, if you have got an AR kit, does support a bunch of augmented reality applications already. On top of it, the world is also moving into something called as a WebXR, wherein your traditional web browser can also bring in some kind of extended reality immersive technologies into picture. On top of it, if you look at it, I would suggest worth looking into this growing list of XR devices, an article that is published in our XR practices Medium page. If you look at it, there are multiple new entrants already coming in there. There are kind of 70 plus manufacturers who are already into this particular market, which was mind blowing to me when I read about it. And each of them are kind of competing with each other with more sleek goggles looking XR devices. Gone are the days when the devices look really bulky, kind of fitting in. These glasses are really, really sleek. And some of the times these glasses also comes with the prescription lenses. And you can also flip if you don't want the prescription lenses or the XR lenses that you wanted to do. So there's already about close to 150 plus XR devices. You might have already seen some of the telecom manufacturers in India also kind of getting into the space. Jio is already coming there. There are not quite far away like other people getting into the mainstream here, right? So challenges, you have solutions, possible solutions, you have devices. So what is left? The people, right? Which is the key agenda of our topic. With this changing business models requires more diversified skills. So how does a business analyst is now going to transform to this new demand? Because it is not a traditional development, a 2D development of things. So I kind of equated a role of a business analyst to an analogy of a movie director. So the business analyst is now going to become a kind of an orchestrator who's now going to talk in the terms of an engineer to a scientist, to designers. The designers include visual interaction designers, to developers and testers, to make sure that they create this awesome experience for the users, which is what I call as the light, camera, and action. I'm going to talk in a little more detail. So the world of BA is changing. The BA is apart from their traditional problem-solving skills, communication skills, thinking out of the box, they have to now also kind of becoming more creative. They also have to become, start thinking and then start putting visual storytelling in place. And this is where I call, these are some of the elements that they start looking at it. The first thing is what I call as setting the scene. Like any movie director, like when he wants to actually give you that experience to the user, they have to put that frame into you so that you start engaging into it. So that's exactly what we need to create. We have to create a scene which is completely immersive to the user, and it is also engaging to the users. And more importantly, when you create the scene, it has to be kind of, should not cause any kind of comfort to the users in terms of the neck movement or his hand movement, everything. So let's assume that you create a scene right here. Now, one of the things before I get in there, I want to talk about is now your whole 3D world is, or your real world becomes your screen. You're not kind of restricting the user to look into his mobile phone or his laptop or your PC screen or everything. Now, the complete 3D world is where he's actually looking into it. Now, when you create a scene out there, you have to make sure how does the interaction elements play in there. Because a lot of things is not controllable by you. The amount of light that is going to come in there, the kind of objects that is right there below, behind that scene, and what kind of elements are going to be lying in out there. So everything is kind of dynamic. But at the same time, you have to also create that engaging atmosphere with minimal discomfort and fatigue to the user so that he start interacting. Whatever he wants should be right there. Let's assume that he wants to close it and you keep it at the far left corner of it, and he has to take his eyes or the neck right there. It's going to be difficult for the user to get in there. The next one that you need to think about is the user interactions. Now, the interactions is something that you need to think about beyond our traditional keyboard and mouse. Now, the user's interaction now is like his head is becoming his new mouse, and his eyes is the new gaze pointer that you're going to use it. So whatever I'm going to look at it right now on a 3D environment, I start focusing on it, and that should start interacting to my eye focus. So I can click on it by gazing on it, right? So there's something that you need to think about. Your head is becoming the new mouse and eyes are becoming the new pointers. And then you can also bring in other kind of interactions also into place. Interactions such as voice combined with it. Like for example, a lot of devices today do also, like apart from gaze and dwell, I can also do voice interaction. So I can blend interactions together. In some of the applications, you might have to think about just not having your hand, apart from your eyes and your voice, you need to bring in some kind of gestures into it. Probably you might have to bring in some kind of controllers into it. So these are some of the things that you need to start thinking about. Like what is the kind of interaction type? How is the user is going to interact? There are specific use cases. If you get into details of each of the industries, they would say that, hey, I wanted to have my hands free for the workers to work upon it. Typically, production and other environments, troubleshooting environments, they wanted the hands to lie on the device so that the user can freely work by just by gazing into it. But whereas if you look at gaming industries and all those things, you need controllers into place for precise controlling of devices, like surgeries that you wanted to do. Probably you need to have surgical instruments kind of thing so that the user can actually use that on a simulated environment. The next thing within the interaction space is also that you need to start thinking about is the degree of freedom that is available to the user. So there is something which we call as 3-DOF and 6-DOF. That is, you should be able to kind of accommodate both your rotational axis of your head and as well as the translation movement of your body. So sometimes what I will do is that I might start walking into the screen. So which means there is a translation movement that is happening. Sometimes I can literally start walking away from the user. And then I can also move away from the user. So backwards, jumping, surging, ducking, every other single thing you have to start accommodating it. So you have to think when we kind of create those stories and create those things. Apart from setting the scene, you also have to think about what kind of interaction mechanism that is going to have with the user and what kind of degree of freedom that we're going to give them there. The next important thing that comes in here is the viewport that is available to the user. Traditionally, our eyes has got a huge viewport. I can look at from 170 to 210 degrees. But whereas with this head-mounted devices, my viewport is kind of slightly restricted. So typically, most of the devices just have a viewport of 30 to 40. Just to give you a feeling, you can just cut the paper and you can actually visualize it right here. So what you get to see is the viewport. So that's about 40 to 50 degrees switches. So you have to also maintain your interaction elements within that particular viewport for the user, because you cannot keep it at the far end. The user can, if he wants, he can move the complete view to there, but the key interaction should happen within there. And then it is also to maintain your head movement here. Like for example, I cannot keep something right here. Then it creates a pain out here if for a prolonged use. Similarly, the user cannot keep it right here. So the optimal direction for the head for the user to work upon is somewhere here, which is about 0 to 35 degrees. So these are some of the things that you need to take in there. First, engaging the user, which is setting the scene, what kind of interaction that you're going to create, what kind of freedom that you're going to give it to the user, and then the viewport that is available to the user. And the next two things is to make sure that the user is able to read and then work on it, which typically works on the typography and the luminosity, the light element that is there, how much of light can be used for these particular applications, how do you kind of automatically control your luminosity based on the outside light that is there within the system. And in order to give you this complete engage or immersive feeling, you got to also take care of your sound and haptic feedback. The last and least, that's something that keeps stressing is that there are two safety elements that we need to take into consideration. Safety one is that you got to always ensure or give the user of the elements that is outside into this world, because sometimes when you're engaged the user, he might actually trip on something and fall. So most of the VR devices, it tells you like before you start wearing, after you start wearing the device and before you start engaging with them, they ask you to create something that's called a boundary or a guardian. Similarly, in mixed reality spaces, you are able to see the real spaces, but when the user walk in there, you kind of have to give them some kind of notification to make sure that the safety of the user is being taken care of. The second safety element that I'm talking about is the behavioral change that can happen to the users. Because prolonged use of the device might affect your mental health. It could also kind of, you get into a completely different situation, isolate yourself from social distancing, talking to people, and you kind of immersing yourself there. We've already seen it from Pokemon Go games and all those things where people get addicted to it. So that's another element that you have to also take care when you're kind of designing. So just to conclude on the role of a BA, I call this as light, camera, and action. Light is the creativity and imagination more than ever, because now you need to put all your creative hats together to think about what kind of solution or what kind of experience am I going to give it to the user. The second one is the content quality, which I call it as a camera, because it becomes even more contextual in nature. Because today I cannot create an XR just because I wanted to create a solution on XR. We have to think through the process to understand what is the real pain points of the user, understand will XR really solve this problem, and then create the content quality for the user. Apply your convergent thinking, divergent thinking mechanism, or second order thinking mechanism. Put your 5 whys into picture. Always ask is XR is the right solution to you before even you move into that, right? And then the last one is to make sure once you kind of nailed that XR is going to do it, make it personalized, make it engaging to the user, creating that awesome experience for the user. Because one of the most important thing for the BA is is that they kind of orchestrate this together to create that awesome experience for the user. Because the BA is somebody who can actually think through the holistic picture of the particular user. Because he becomes even more responsible now, unless or until it is an engagement that is more appealing to the user. Because even though if I create a great business value, but if there is no experience in terms of comfort of using the product, nobody's going to use the product, right? So it's a new beginning, folks. It's not a science fiction anymore. The tech is emerging, but as BA becoming even more responsible, I talked these three things. Again, I wanted to make sure that we create or identify those use cases which kind of naturally aligns to the problem in hand. Don't try to kind of force fit an XR solution there. Put in your 5 eyes to understand what is adaptability and usability of this XR tech. If it makes sense, then we have to plunge in more. Because the reason I'm saying is that we don't want to create that short-lived solution for the user just because there's a challenge, there's a problem there. Because XR as a domain has got a plethora of use cases that you can actually dwell in more, get in more. This thing. Some of the use cases that I talked about, simulators, online training classes, the surgeries that the users can do, the sales, those things, those are kind of fantastic use cases which is actually coming into mainstream. It's our responsibility to identify little more use cases, put your light camera in action, get your creativity, get your contextual content quality, get your engagement in place to create those experiences for you. So the last thing is gear up for the change. I just wanted to end up with the quote from Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest species that survives. It's not the intelligent species. It's the species which is kind of adaptable to change. With that note, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm reachable on Hari.R at ThoughtWorks. I would recommend users watching this to subscribe to medium.com XR practices. There's a lot of information that's available for you. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Hari. And we just ended in time. And thank you so much for that amazing talk. Folks, please do give us feedback on the feedback form shared in the chat. And if you have any more questions for Hari, don't forget to join us on Telegram and join him on Telegram, and his contact details are also available on the screen. Thank you so much for joining this session. And we have a panel discussion happening next. Please join us for the panel discussion. We have some thought leaders from some retail business houses across the globe. Please do join us there as well. Thank you so much, Hari, and thank you so much, folks, for joining.
Thank you.